It was a normal taping night at CBS Studio City in Hollywood. The band was playing the familiar, jazzy intro to Carol's theme. The audience, packed into the bleachers, was buzzing with anticipation. It was 1977, the height of the variety show era, and Carol Burnett was the undisputed queen of Saturday night television. Every week, she pulled the famous tug on her ear, a signal to her grandmother that she was okay. Every week, she made America forget its worries. But on this specific night in late 1977, something happened that had never happened before. The laughter stopped. Not because the jokes weren't landing, but because the woman delivering them broke. In the control booth, producers stood frozen. Crew members, veterans who had seen every blooper and mishap possible, turned away from their monitors, unable to watch. What remained on the tape was a performance so raw, so devastatingly real, that Carol Burnett, the woman who could laugh at anything, has reportedly refused to watch the playback. Ever. Most people remember Carol Burnett for the iconic curtain dress in Went with the Wind or the zany antics of Mrs. Wiggins. But this is not about those sketches. This is about the episode where the comedy was a mask for a collision of two tragedies, one professional, one profoundly personal. To understand why this specific episode haunts Carol Burnett, you have to look at the state of her world in the autumn of 1977. The show was in its 11th season. By all accounts, it should have been a victory lap. However, behind the scenes, everything was falling apart. First, there was the Harvey Korman situation. For a decade, Harvey Korman had been Carol's comedic soulmate. He was the straight man who could break character with a single glance. But in 1977, Korman was gone. He had left to pursue his own series, leaving a void in the cast that could not be filled. In a desperate attempt to save the chemistry, the network brought in Dick Van Dyke. Dick Van Dyke. A legend. But the fit was wrong. The rhythm was off. Van Dyke lasted only 10 episodes. 10. By the time we reached the infamous episode in December, the set was tense. The ratings were slipping against the Love Boat. Carol felt the weight of the entire CBS network on her shoulders. But the professional stress was just the prelude. The real earthquake was happening at home. While the cameras were rolling and the live audience was laughing, Carol Burnett was walking through a private nightmare. Earlier in the 1970s, Burnett had been open about her struggles with her daughter, Carrie Hamilton. Carrie was a teenager grappling with severe drug addiction and emotional turmoil. By 1977, the situation had escalated from difficult to catastrophic. As Carol Burnett later revealed in her memoirs, she was living in a state of constant terror. She would finish a sketch pretending to fall downstairs or singing off-key and then rush to a phone to call home, or to a rehab facility, to see if her daughter was still alive. This is the context that the studio audience never had. They saw a redhead with a million-watt smile. They didn't see a mother whose heart was shattering into a million pieces. And it is precisely this collision, the dying show versus the dying piece at home, that sets the stage for the episode filmed in December 1977. Let's pull the tape. The specific episode that Carol cannot bear to watch aired on December 3, 1977. It featured the brilliant guest star Bernadette Peters. On paper, it looks like a standard episode. There is a silly sketch about a water cooler. There is a pantomime about a couple struggling to open a wine bottle. But the landmine was hidden in a sketch simply titled Two Best Friends. The premise was simple, almost cliché. Carol and Bernadette play two women who are best friends. They meet for lunch. However, a third woman, played by Vicki Lawrence, keeps trying to insert herself into the friendship, claiming she is closer to Carol than Bernadette is. Here is where the comedy becomes tragedy. The sketch was written to highlight jealousy and possessiveness in a funny way. But as the cameras rolled, Carol Burnett did not play it for laughs. She played it for keeps. According to audience accounts and the emotional tone preserved on the surviving tape, Carol's character becomes desperate. She isn't just annoyed at the intruder, she is terrified of losing her friend. Her voice cracks. Her eyes, usually wide with comic mania, glaze over with genuine tears. Those who were there say that Carol wasn't acting about a lunch date. She was acting out her fear of losing her daughter, Carrie. The friend in the sketch represented the healthy, happy life she wanted for her child. The intruder represented the drugs and the distance that were pulling them apart. The director, Dave Powers, likely realized he was witnessing something rare, a total collapse of the barrier between performer and person. At one point in the sketch, the script called for Carol to shout a funny line of frustration. Instead, Carol Burnett let out a sound that wasn't a laugh or a line, it was a sob. She turned her back to the camera. In the world of live-to-tape television in the 70s, you kept rolling. You don't stop the tape. The studio audience, which had been roaring minutes earlier, fell into a stunned silence. A few people let out nervous chuckles, but they died quickly. They realized this wasn't a bit. This was real. Bernadette Peters, a brilliant actress, tried to steer the ship back to shore, but Carol was lost at sea. The sketch ended awkwardly. The credits rolled. Normally, after a taping, Carol would hug everyone, sign autographs, and head home. After this taping, Carol Burnett reportedly walked straight to her dressing room, closed the door, and sat in the dark. She never watched the playback. It is now 2025. Carol Burnett is 92 years old. She has received the Mark Twain Prize, the Kennedy Center Honors, and the Love of the World. She has written books reflecting on her life, including her difficult childhood with alcoholic parents. So why won't she watch that one episode? It's not because she is ashamed of her acting. In fact, critics have called that performance brilliant and heart-wrenching. Carol Burnett is a perfectionist, but she is not vain. She refuses to watch it because that episode is a time machine. It takes her back to the worst night of her life. In her memoir Carrie and Me, Burnett writes extensively about the guilt of being a working mother. She struggled with the idea that if she had been home more, maybe she could have saved her daughter from addiction. Watching that 1977 episode would force her to look the ghost of that guilt in the eye. Secondly, the episode represents a loss of control. Comedy is about control, timing, punchlines, the reaction. In that sketch, Carol lost control. She let the real Carol out, and the real Carol was a woman drowning in fear. The story doesn't end with the credits rolling in 1977. The tragedy of that episode is amplified by what came later. Carol did not stop working. She finished the season. She put on the brave face. But the fear she displayed in that sketch came true. Her daughter Carrie Hamilton's struggles with addiction continued for years. Here is the heartbreaking postscript: Carrie eventually got clean. She became a talented actress and writer. Carol and Carrie reconciled deeply. They even worked together on a musical adaptation of Carol's Broadway debut, Once Upon a Mattress. But the reprieve was cruelly short. In 2002, 25 years after that fateful episode, Carrie Hamilton died of cancer. She was only 38 years old. Think about that. In 1977, Carol was acting out a primal scream of fear that she would lose her daughter. She lost her anyway, just in a different way than she feared. If she were to watch that 1977 episode now, she wouldn't just see a mother afraid of losing a child to drugs. She would see a mother who didn't know that her child only had 25 years left. She would see a ghost. For decades, this episode has been a sort of dark grail for fans of the Carol Burnett show. It isn't available in the usual syndicated reruns, which tend to favor the Carol Burnett and Friends repackaged clips from safer seasons. Why is it buried? Because Carol Burnett owns a significant stake in her own legacy. She has the power to keep this episode out of heavy rotation. While other classic episodes are streamed on Paramount+, this particular December 1977 episode is notably absent from highlight reels. This is not a case of a bad episode being hidden. This is a case of a painful memory being protected. Most people think Carol Burnett's bravest moment was moving to New York with only $6 in her pocket. Others think it was wearing that curtain rod dress. But the bravest thing Carol Burnett ever did was walking onto that stage in 1977 while her heart was being shredded at home. And the kindest thing she has done for herself is refusing to watch the evidence. She doesn't need to watch it. She lived it. She survived it. And for the millions of us who grew up laughing with her, maybe we don't need to see it either. Maybe it's enough to know that behind every comedian's smile, there is a story they are still not ready to tell. Carol Burnett tugged on her ear that night, a signal that meant "I'm okay, I love you." But for one episode, it was a lie. And she never wants to see the moment that lie became visible to the world.